Wait, what am I supposed to say about this BMW? Well, it's nice, expensive, unique, custom made. Let them buy it. Are you recording this? Yeah, I am. Oh no. Okay, wait, we need to do an intro. 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1. Clap. Good morning, my name is Smoku and some people know me as Mariusz, which is basically Marian and Janusz combined. Today we're in the center of Warsaw with a rather unusual motorcycle. It's a BMW R 18 in a custom version. A motorcycle that I think every editorial team and every website has already said everything possible about. That's why I'm going to talk about this motorcycle a little differently. I'll tell you about the BMW R 18. Starting from how this motorcycle was created and what you can do with it. I've prepared a few customs from around the world to show you, just to prove that this motorcycle actually does make sense, because when you look at it at its size and the dimensions of the engine, it seems like it doesn't. But I rode it for 2 days, and in my opinion, it actually makes quite a lot of sense. I'll talk about the machine you see here at the end, and we'll start with a bike called the BMW R 18 Onitora. This is a motorcycle made in the Bozozoku style. If you've ever watched manga, anime, or other weird Japanese stuff, you know it's pretty wild. And a normal person would have to eat a lot of hallucinogenic mushrooms to come up with something like that. For the Japanese, that's not a problem. I wrote about this in one of the issues of Shuat Motorcycle. For example, the Japanese have vending machines with used underwear. They also have, for instance, erotic dance shows that end with men sitting with flashlights, staring at women's crotches. So the Japanese are pretty eccentric, and the Bozozoku style is just as eccentric. This style developed years ago in Japan and is all about standing out as much as possible on the street. It's not about the motorcycle's performance, its power, or how well it handles corners. The point is for it to be as outrageous as possible, and that's exactly what this BMW R 18 is like. It's huge, white, with a giant protruding seat at the back, but the real showstopper is the front fairing, which looks like it was taken off some old racing motorcycle. The fairing is mounted in such a way that it doesn't cover the headlight. The headlight isn't tucked into a cutout hole or anything. Instead, the fairing just hangs above the headlight. I think this is the wildest project ever built on the R 18. And as it turns out, it wasn't the Japanese who did it. It was made by a British workshop that has specialized in customization for years. It's called Untitled Motorcycles. And in my honest opinion, if you ever have the incredible opportunity to see this remarkable creation in person, I personally witnessed it in London at the renowned Bike Shed Motorcycle Club, you will undoubtedly agree that they must have employed some truly heavy-duty and robust materials and techniques to meticulously craft it. However, I'm showing you this so that you understand that sometimes custom motorcycles make absolutely no sense, and they're made solely to show others that in the custom industry, there really are no limits. None at all. The second machine I've prepared for you is a dragster, a blue dragster built by the customizer Roland, an American customizer who spent his childhood in his father's workshop. His father specializes in producing parts for a leading American motorcycle brand. So Roland got into customization very quickly. He has built dozens of motorcycles. I can share one story with you involving a Polish brand. A good few years ago at Wheels and Waves, which is an event in Biarritz, France, while walking between the booths, Roland Sands met our friend from Warsaw who was making very nice motorcycle clothing from Kevlar and Armalite. And you know what? A few months later, Roland Sands had exactly the same shirts in his collection, but that's not what this is about. Roland Sands' involvement with BMW is also quite interesting. Because years ago, when the R90 model was being introduced, Roland built the first two. He took part in building the first R90 concept. If you ask how it happened that such a pragmatic brand like BMW created the R90 project, a heritage motorcycle, the first in years after a long absence in this category. Of course, at BMW you'll hear that this motorcycle was created for the brand's 90th anniversary, because it's all about history and tradition. However, every year I go to Glemsec, where there are a lot of behind-the-scenes conversations. One of the stories goes that someone went to the warehouse, checked how many GS engines were left, and something had to be done with them. And of course, all of this ended up in the hands of a man named Ola Stenegard. He is a Swede who for years was the chief designer at BMW Motorrad, and it was he, in collaboration with Roland Sands, who designed the R9T concept, which in a way opened the door for BMW to realize that the heritage segment is something that other brands have left untapped. In my opinion, you still don't really see this on the roads in Poland. The BMW R9T is truly one of the most incredibly interesting and remarkably multifaceted motorcycles available for extensive modification, a truly versatile platform designed for comprehensive customization, significant modifications, and all sorts of other such enjoyable and exciting fun. At first glance, Roland Sands Custom R18 doesn't appear to look any significantly different from the front, except for the distinctive upside-down suspension system. The motorcycle is lowered to the max, but a keen eye will notice that it's a bike whose rear end resembles dragsters racing on a straight line. And of course, the one thing I feel is missing here is some kind of turbo or supercharger or anything like that. But I think that 1,800 cc of displacement and over 150 Newton meters of torque, plus track tires, are more than enough to have some fun on the straight. This is a very interesting project that shows the R18 is just as modular a motorcycle as the R9T, and that what looks to us like a factory bobber can be transformed into a dragster style. And it really makes sense. Roland has installed very low clip-ons here. The motorcycle is lowered to the max with short exhausts sticking out on the sides that definitely roar incredibly. In my opinion, it's quite an interesting concept. The third motorcycle is from a workshop in Taipei. The workshop is called Rajcrafts, and has been customizing motorcycles of various brands for years. Why am I mentioning it next? Because the founder of this workshop worked with Roland Sands in the United States for many years. That's where he trained, learned, and gained experience. His custom built on the R18 is a classic bobber, and the black is the new black style. I say that black is the new black because it's always said that black is the best color for motorcycles. I think so too. And here we have, at first glance, a motorcycle that also doesn't seem much different from the original. But if you look at the fuel tank, at how the details were made, even those exhausts that reference the first concept, you'll see that what appears unchanged is actually changed to the max. The fuel tank, reminiscent of old BMWs, is truly something incredible. A classic bobber seat. And all the details are done in black. The only things that stand out are the workshop's logo on the cylinders and the intake covers, which have been left in chrome. If someone likes this kind of dark style, it's quite an interesting thing. Another motorcycle that is an unusual use of the R18. This is a motorcycle created by Shinya Kimura, a Japanese customizer who has developed his amazing style over the years. If I had to describe that style in one word, it would be Mad Max style, and his R18 looks exactly like that. From what I can see, it was presented during the pandemic, so it fit perfectly into the post-pandemic Mad Max-like world. At the front, there's a huge fairing, 2 projector headlights, what seems to be an air intake that looks like it was taken off a vacuum cleaner square fuel tank, and a long cafe racer-style tail section. What's interesting about Shinya Kimura's work is that he's a person who doesn't design in any AutoCAD program, nor does he draw sketches on paper. He simply takes a piece of sheet metal, a hammer, pounds away, and turns it into a custom motorcycle. Of course, not everyone likes the Mad Max style. However, when it comes to using such a modern, such a new platform as the R18, probably 99% of people who see this motorcycle would never say that it's new equipment. They would rather say that it's a motorcycle built 30 or 40 years ago. It's worth seeing this to open your mind a little. Well, there is one thing that doesn't sit right with me. The turn signals, I'm guessing they were brought in from Poland from the Elch brand, but that's a detail that can be changed. The next machine comes from Canada, and usually it's a build that turns the R18 into a cafe racer. If you had asked me before seeing this motorcycle what is most important in a cafe racer, I would of course have said it's the proportions, that is repeating the line of the tank in the tail section and making sure the tail ends in line with the axis of the wheel. And now comes what's called a twist, because the R18 Cafe Racer from Canada ends, well, well before the line of the wheels axis. This is probably the first motorcycle where that doesn't hurt its look, because I usually say that bikes that end too early look like a dog whose tail has been cut off. But here, it actually looks pretty good. Maybe it's because the exhausts are routed upwards and run under the tail section. And secondly, the motorcycle is a combination of two extremes, black and chrome. And I have to admit, when I saw it for the first time, I was surprised. But now, the longer I look at this machine, the more I like it. And it turns out that proportions are important, but also in the context of the overall size of the motorcycle, because this massive engine, which sticks out on both sides, and whose entire block is gigantic. You have to know that the engine block with the gearbox weighs 111 kilos, which, considering the total weight of the motorcycle, 350 kilograms, means the engine makes up quite a significant percentage. So here, the proportions of the Cafe Racer itself are a bit off, but as a whole, in my opinion, it looks great. Let's keep going. Oh, this is a really cool motorcycle. This motorcycle was built by the Belgian workshop Workhorse Speed Shop, and Bryce, its founder, is the guy who a few years ago at Glemsec built a Yamaha XSR 700 with a supercharger, and on top of that he added the pneumatic gearbox, just total madness. And he got this motorcycle. He got the R18 in his hands, and in my opinion created a small work of art. Because while Roland Sand's Dragster looks like a dragster, so it's a bit, well, rough. Here we have something that resembles a piece of art from the 1920s and 1930s. The enclosed exhaust here looks like the exhaust on a Bentley or Rolls Royce. At the front, there's a reference to the small fairing of the Harley-Davidson Fat Boy, which is a very, very cool use of the American brand. And again, these are actually my colors, because everything here is black, only the cylinders, the engine block cover, and the tip of that enclosed exhaust are in silver, in the color of aluminum. This design really suits me. It's cohesive with the white tire at the back. It's definitely something I could have in my garage. Completely unnecessary, like all my motorcycles, but I would love to have it. The next motorcycle from Mandrill Garage is called Dark Phoenix, and it's something that BMW designers should have looked at before creating the touring versions of the R18, because it's an R18 with a gigantic front fairing, which at first glance you may or may not like. It has a headlight split in half, which references the classic BMW car kidney grills. But if I were to put a factory BMW touring here with its fairing and this custom one, I think most users would choose the customized one. I think the key here is the shape of the fairing. It's much slimmer than on the factory motorcycle. It's worth seeing, because it turns out that even motorcycles with gigantic fairings, I call these motorcycles refrigerators, can be made in an interesting way. And finally, something that completely blew my mind. It's a German workshop that created the R18 called Spirit of Passion. It's an R18 in the Art Deco style. If you don't know what characterizes the Art Deco style, I recommend the Polish artist Tamara Wempika. She, Izum, was the queen of the Art Deco style, and this motorcycle is a reflection of that painterly style. A gigantic, massive, heavy fairing that covers the entire front and sides of the motorcycle. You can't see the wheel. At the front there are only those very classic elongated kidney grills reminiscent of BMW cars. On top there's a small windshield. Honestly, the motorcycle looks more like an airplane than a motorcycle. At the back the wheel is covered almost all the way down. I think that on Warsaw's potholes that fender wouldn't last very long. Well, this is something that hasn't been seen before in motorcycle customization. It hasn't, or maybe it has, because the owner of this workshop, I met this guy at Glemsec in Germany, had previously built a similar Art Deco style design, I think on an R80. You can look up Kingston Customs on Google. Basically, when you see the owner with his wild hairstyle, you'll understand that only someone like him could build a machine like this. It's something, well, something that just blows your mind. The headlight is hidden inside that gigantic fairing. Interestingly, at Glemsec 101, which is an event that this year attracted over 40,000 people to the old Solitude racetrack near Stuttgart, they held races exclusively for the BMW R18 category. And this motorcycle, which looked the most like a museum piece anomaly, the Spirit of Passion won all the races, even though there were a dozen or so bikes based on the R18 competing. Well, in my opinion, this is a total custom build that shows that in the world of motorcycle modifications, even though people say the sky's the limit, that doesn't really apply. There is no limit. Simply put, whatever you can imagine, you can make it happen. All right, I've picked out all these bikes, but now it's worth reminding ourselves why BMW made this motorcycle and how they made it, because that's an interesting story too, and not everyone writes about it. Before this motorcycle was created, there was the whole story with the R9T, which in my opinion is the most modular motorcycle. You can argue with me about that or not. However, traveling around the world, I saw custom bikes that were so strange. If you ever come to Liberty Motors in Piasečno, there's one of the custom bikes built on an R9T, also in the Art Deco style. It's complete madness when it comes to modifications, and what I like about BMW, what I didn't expect from a German brand, is the way they introduced this motorcycle to the market. Because first, two concepts were created. One was made by the Revival Cycles workshop, and it was just the engineer, rather. Sort of engine concept with a delicate tubular frame, two wheels, basically a concept that was never meant to be ridden, but was supposed to show what's most important in this motorcycle, because the engine is the most important part. When we say that the engine is the most important part of a motorcycle, it immediately brings to mind the custom builder Maxwell Hazan, an American builder who starts every one of his projects by mounting the engine on a stand. Lately, he usually uses old Jap engines for his projects and builds the entire motorcycle around the engine. And I get the impression that at BMW, someone also thought, listen, in 5 or 10 years, we won't be able to produce combustion engines. Let's do something crazy, something that will show that we, as a German brand, very pragmatic, that we are the ones who think out of the box. We're doing something contrary to everyone else. Because looking at how Harley is changing its range of motorcycles, moving towards what BMW has been doing for years, BMW went completely against the current, and for that they really deserve applause, because they created an engine. First, there was the premiere of two concepts, then there was the premiere of the engine itself. It's actually interesting that press releases went out all over the world. The premiere of the engine, that it weighs 111 kilos, has 91 horsepower, about 157 Newton meters of torque, that it's going to be something powerful, cooled by oil and air. So, well, it's madness. And only later, after building up such suspense, did they show the factory motorcycle. Of course, everyone said, oh no, because obviously the factory motorcycle has nothing to do with the concept they showed. Since the concept was a very stylish, delicate, minimalist bobber, while the factory motorcycle had everything a factory bike needs to have: properly sized fenders, turn signals, license plate mount, seat, and so on and so on. Not everyone liked that, and of course BMW once again did, look, we have a whole catalog of parts for you. And as it turns out, you can make a motorcycle that strongly references the concept without needing to contact customizers from around the world. And as we know, those people don't have regular working hours. I'm currently building a motorcycle in the street tracker style, and this project has already been going on for 2 years. And after the first year, I already realized that that's just how it is. If you want a custom bike that someone builds for you from scratch, where only the engine and the front part of the frame remain from the original motorcycle, you have to be patient. If I had bought this motorcycle at the dealership and had to wait 2 years for it to be modified, I would probably go crazy and murder the person who was supposed to take care of it. So if you don't want to go through the full process of rebuilding and modifying the motorcycle like the ones I showed you, it turns out there's a parts catalog where you can choose a fender, seat, completely different wheels, cylinder covers, exhaust, which is also something I'll show you while riding so you can hear how it sounds. And this motorcycle is very, very close to the concept that even I have to admit it's one of the few BMWs I'd actually like to have in my garage. All right, now I'll tell you a bit about what this motorcycle is. The most important thing about this concept is the change to the rear. The factory motorcycle is quite heavily built up here. Here we have a very delicate fender mounted on these thin brackets. That's something I really like. The seat has been changed, very bobber style, but comfortable. Yesterday I even rode with my son, and it's actually pretty good. The exhausts reference the concept flattened, kind of crushed cigars, and that's something I really like. They sound amazing. This motorcycle already has 150 Newton meters of torque ready at just 2000 RPM. So every twist of the throttle, especially with this exhaust, first of all, your left hand gets a bit of a workout because the bike leans that way. And secondly, if a parent is driving with their child in a car somewhere in traffic, this exhaust is definitely not the best lullaby. However, if you don't rev it high, you can really ride it in a kind of silent mode. It can be quiet. Of course, twisting it above 3000 RPM makes the engine come alive, and I really like that. It's amazing that when you ride this motorcycle, even if it's not modified like this one, you get the feeling that you're somehow integrated with this powerful engine. That's something I realized a few years ago when I rode Harley-Davidson Road King Special at Glemsec 101. I was never a fan of this type of motorcycle, neither choppers nor bobbers, nothing that looked like that. I took a ride on the Road King at Glemsec and realized that with motorcycles of this size, it's not about how they handle, how effective the brakes are, how well they accelerate, or whether you can ride them through corners on your knee. With these motorcycles, it's more about integrating the person with the machina, since that the machine can't function without me. And I, somewhat dependent on the qualities of that powerful engine, can't function without the machine. And Harley was the first such machine, and the second is the R18. For a long time I didn't get on this motorcycle because I had some kind of internal resistance, thinking, no, I don't want to do this. And of course, in the editorial office, I have my colleague Andres who kind of pushes me into these things. So then I get on a motorcycle like that and usually say, Jesus, now I'll have to take back everything bad I said about this bike before I even got on it, because as you probably already know, I'm from Seattle. I'm someone who has 2 billion prejudices and has to do something a bit against my own will to be convinced. And unfortunately, the R18 is just that kind of motorcycle. Yesterday, I had to get back quickly from the airport to Jolly Boss to pick up my son. And someone might say, no, with cylinders like that, this motorcycle isn't suitable for city riding. I don't want to brag about my mere recklessness, about how fast I got from the airport to Jolly Boss at 4 in the afternoon, but I think that riders of small 125cc motorcycles wouldn't have managed. And here, the R18 really proved itself. Plus, there's exactly what the American brand has always said, good vibration. It was on a Harley that I started to understand what that means, and BMW is a confirmation of it. Here, you feel integrated with the engine, and every twist of the throttle makes you feel how everything comes to life, how the crankshaft starts working, how the pistons are just pounding inside the cylinders. It's truly an incredible experience, and I recommend it to everyone, even if you're not interested in this kind of motorcycle. If I had to choose the only motorcycle I could ever own for the rest of my life, I wouldn't pick the BMW R18, but honestly, I've never chosen any motorcycle for my garage in that way. I never choose motorcycles, firstly, based on technical specifications, because here, 91 horsepower compared to Italian bikes that have 200 horsepower and can ride on stock parts on the best racetracks, putting in pretty good lap times. There's nothing crazy like that here. But those 150 something Newton meters of torque, the fact that from a standstill, you can use this tiny button end for that, BMW really deserves huge props. There's this little button here, you hold it down, traction control turns off, you set the mode you ride, the riding modes. 3 riding modes, rock, roll and rain. And in rock mode, we turn off traction control, a gentle pull on the lever, and this motorcycle does exactly what it was made to do. It just does crazy things. If you're looking for something that stands out on the road and secondly can give you some pretty unusual riding experiences, then the R18 is cool. When it comes to filtering through traffic, in a moment I'll measure how far the cylinders stick out from the engine block. I personally didn't have any problems yesterday. Maybe it's also because of the exhaust, which makes this motorcycle really noticeable. As for non-factory parts, the rims by the aforementioned Roland Sands, the American customizer, they're a bit like those from American shows about modified cars. Kind of like Hot Wheels toys. Some people like them, others don't. Personally, I would prefer a spoke version here. The second thing is the exhausts, and the third is the tail section and seat. Not sure if the mirrors are aftermarket, but they look pretty good here. I would try putting on some cafe racer style bar and mirrors here. The cylinder covers are quite nice. I'm not sure about the front cover. No, the front engine cover is probably stock. And the creme de la creme of the R18, something you wouldn't expect from a pragmatic German brand, is the drive shaft, which is exposed on the outside. No matter the version, whether you buy the classic and modify it like this, or the touring version, the drive shaft is always on the outside. And when you look at how it works from the side, how it moves as you ride, that's probably the very essence of showcasing what has always been most important in motorcycle. That's showing this kind of mechanics and the fact that a motorcycle can't function without a person. And then it turns out that a person can't do without this motorcycle either, because on such a bike you feel integrated with the machine. Maybe it sounds like some kind of coaching bullshit, but it really isn't, because if you ride one, if you see how people ride customs, those fully customized bikes all over the world, you'll understand that every such project has as much meaning as you give it. In my opinion, this motorcycle makes a lot of sense because lately I've been riding my own bikes, and I think I have 7 or 8 of them. I got on this one, and it's a completely different experience. Each of my motorcycles gives a different kind of feeling, and the R18, even slightly customized, even just with factory parts, stands out especially. It's a completely different set of emotions. There is a whole spectrum of these emotions, and I recommend you check it out. And follow the world of motorcycles, because I also post some pretty interesting custom bikes there, and there are quite a lot of them being created. Regards, Dragon.